When I was choosing a wedding dress with Jaxon, I tripped and hit my head. After getting up, I pretended to have amnesia to tease him. Who are you? Who's getting married? He paused, his eyes on me suddenly distant and unfamiliar. Miss Tessa, I am Jaxon, your best friend's fiancé. I almost laughed out loud. At Jaxon, you have a bit of a comedic talent, almost slipped out. But his expression didn't seem to be joking. It was like a moment of relief, as if he had finally shed the emotional shackles from our 10-year relationship. I said, oh, and pretended not to know, asking, so why am I in the bridal shop? He furrowed his brows. Ava couldn't make it today. You two have a good relationship and your body is similar, so she asked you to try the dresses for her. I nodded deliberately and said, I thought it was for us to get married. He politely shook his head, pulling away from me. Miss Tessa, please don't joke like that, it could be misunderstood. Before I could say anything else, he stood up. Miss Tessa, since you've fallen, we won't choose a wedding dress today. I'll come with Ava to pick one another day. I smiled slightly. All right. I waited for a taxi and only after getting in did my smile fade. I touched the back of my head where I had hit it, the sharp pain, a bit of blood on my fingers. Jaxon didn't even mention taking me to the hospital. Even if we were just friends, he shouldn't be so cold and indifferent. It's kind of funny, after all, we had been together for 10 years. To be exact, it was 7 years of unrequited love, plus 3 years of an underground marriage. Jaxon and I were childhood sweethearts. I had liked him since the first day of high school. Since then, every year I confessed to him once. The answer was always the same. Tessa, you're great, but I don't know what I feel about you. He gave me a vague answer that neither extinguished my passion nor ignited my heart. I thought I would spend my whole life like this, loving one person until I lost myself, living out the rest of my life in vain joy. The turning point came the year I graduated from university. Jackson's grandmother was seriously ill, and in order to ease her mind, Jaxon asked me to play the role of his girlfriend. Grandma, don't worry, I'm with Tessa, we're preparing to get married. Jaxon needed a fiancé, and I had been preparing for this role for 7 years. He said, Tessa, you're the most suitable, no one loves me more than you. It turned out he knew that I loved him, but he never responded. Perhaps I was lucky. After Jaxon said this, Grandma miraculously got better. The lie needed to be continued. So Jaxon and I became a couple as inseparable as glue. We held hands shopping, buying groceries, cooking, and returned home together every night. Occasionally, Jaxon would let me stay over and hold me to sleep. In the middle of the night, listening to his deep, steady breathing, I felt that the so-called peaceful years were nothing more than this. But no one knew we never got a marriage certificate and we didn't live together. On the 10th anniversary of our fake marriage, I couldn't help but ask him, Jaxon, what exactly are we to each other? He was holding his phone, looking a bit unhappy as if he were arguing with someone on the other end. When he heard my question, he turned off his phone and came over. His words fell like a sigh, filling my ears. Tessa, how about we just get married? I thought I had heard wrong, frozen in place. I didn't even notice the egg in the frying pan was burning. Jaxon, helpless, scratched my nose. What, you're dumbfounded? Or you don't want to? My nose tingled and tears fell suddenly. No, I'm just so happy, I can't believe it. Silly girl. Jaxon sighed and hugged me. He was usually cold, but he kissed me and the touch was so warm I could even feel him trembling. I cautiously tried to hug him, but before I could lift my arms halfway, the door opened. Ava stood at the door, her eyes red from crying. Jaxon's hand, which had been around my waist, released. At the time, I didn't notice anything unusual and just interpreted this gesture as him not wanting to show affection in front of others. I invited Ava inside and asked her what happened. Ava was a friend I had known since high school and there were no secrets between us. He even had a key to my house. She was crying so hard that she was gasping for breath. I had a fight with my boyfriend. He's doing this out of spite and is planning to marry someone else. I'm heartbroken. That day, I tried my best to comfort her, even acting silly to make her laugh. I pretended to be a monkey, then a clown, jumping around in front of Ava. She and Jaxon were sitting side by side on the couch, her fingers circling her hair as she looked at me with a critical gaze, like a proud little princess. Tessa, can you put a little more effort into it? The monkey moves I'm doing are much more exaggerated than yours and you're not even close. I had no choice but to keep jumping, putting in more effort until I fell off the chair. Jaxon quickly rushed over and caught me around the waist, preventing me from falling face first. He stared at me intently, his gaze full of concern and tenderness. Are you okay? I was so unaccustomed to his embrace that I squirmed a bit. I'm fine, I'm fine. But he didn't release me, his gaze piercing. It wasn't until Ava coughed that he let go. Showing off your love in front of someone who's heartbroken, huh? She said with a complicated smile. Jaxon, you're something else. Jackson's face flushed red and he immediately withdrew his hand. I nearly fell to the ground. To ease the awkwardness, I continued to act silly. Ooh, my little princess, the gorilla is here to make you smile. Don't cry, it's not pretty when you cry. Ava pushed me away in disgust. Stay away from me, Tessa. You're too ugly for my eyes. I chuckled and kept sticking to Ava. I considered her my dearest friend and I just wanted to cheer her up. But now that I think about it, jumping around without dignity probably made me even more of a fool than a clown. Because Jaxon had said something to me at that moment. He said, "Tessa, enough. Have some self-respect, will you?" At the time I didn't understand. Now I finally get what Jaxon meant. Above me was a sea of grass, and yet I was counting money for a man and a woman who had left me behind. Ava, you must have been so proud, huh? Did you think I was so foolish that I practically bubbled over? And Jaxon, how did you feel? Watching me as your fiancé acting like a fool to make your girlfriend laugh. Did you find it amusing or did you feel heartbroken? Or were you indifferent, unmoved? These questions were like a curse, constantly swirling in my mind. By the time I reached the hospital, the blood from my head wound had soaked through my white shirt. Perhaps my appearance was truly frightening. When I showed up at the emergency room door, a tall male doctor sprinted toward me, swiftly scooped me up and rushed me into the treatment room. My shirt clung to my back and he spoke calmly and decisively, "Apologies." Then with a swift motion he cut open my shirt. Along with it, my bra straps were cut. He froze. I finally found the chance to speak up. "Doctor, I think my injury is on my head?" His ears visibly reddened, but his voice remained steady and cold as he said again, "Apologies." I assured him it was fine. He skillfully began cleaning and bandaging my wound, the entire process gentle and meticulous, to the point where I didn't even feel any pain. However, I needed to be observed in the hospital. As he was preparing the hospitalization form, he advised me, "You may have a concussion or possibly memory loss, so we need to observe you for a couple of days. Please have your husband contact you and bring a change of clothes." Under his gaze, I silently took off my ring. "I don't have a husband." "Huh. He's dead." "Sorry," he said with an apologetic tone. I noticed his name tag. FeelGoodStories. "It's fine," I replied. "The grass on my grave is taller than me." He chuckled at my words. I spoke so casually, but unfortunately that night I came down with a high fever. The heartbreak, combined with the physical pain, felt like a worm gnawing at my bones, eating away at my heart little by little. The 10 years of entanglement were like an old movie, playing over and over in my mind. When I was 16, I stood on the school rooftop and sent Jaxon a message telling him I liked him, and no matter how he felt about me, I just wanted him to tell me the truth. But he didn't reply, neither accepting nor rejecting me. I waited until late into the night and became the laughingstock of my classmates. The next day he finally showed up saying, "Tessa, I don't like you, but it's not like I don't feel anything either." At 18, because of an ambiguous invitation from him, "Do you want to come watch the sea with me?" I changed my university application from the capital city to a seaside city, even though I was allergic to seafood and thought the sea breeze was too fishy. It was obviously he who led me there, but when we met he was cold. "Changing your plans for someone else, I think you're foolish." At 22, after graduating from university, I thought I would finally let go of 7 years of unrequited love, but he took my hand and desperately begged me, "Tessa, just pretend for the sake of my grandmother, be my girlfriend and help me finish this act." At 26, after 10 years of wasted youth on him, he finally said, "Let's get married." But it turned out to be just an impulsive reaction after a fight with his girlfriend. I was just a pawn in their play. It was laughable and sad. I curled up under the blanket, tears falling like rain. I had almost forgotten how to love, and my wasted youth seemed to have no chance of being revived. Through my blurred tears, I saw Ava's Instagram. In the picture, 2 hands were intertwined, one of which I was all too familiar with. I had even put a diamond ring on that finger. The caption read, "One person's fulfillment is better than the entanglement of 3 people. Thank you for leaving so I can love who I love." Such blatant flaunting and provocation. Fulfillment? I wiped my tears little by little, gripping my phone so tightly that I almost crushed the screen. My chest, filled with anger, seemed to also be filled with deep unwillingness. "Sorry, Ava, I really can't just let it go. No one knows Jaxon's personality better than I do. He's indecisive, has a strong moral sense, values filial piety, and is deeply starved for love. Otherwise, he wouldn't have pushed me away repeatedly only to come back again. To put it simply, he craved the feeling of being unconditionally loved by me." A plan for revenge slowly took shape in my heart. That night, the sky poured with heavy rain and I left the hospital heading to Jaxon's place. Our so-called home. Oh no, it should now be called Jaxon and Ava's wedding home. I sat in the living room in the dark, barefoot and soaked through, making sure I appeared to be in a completely lost and defeated state when Jaxon saw me. At 9 p.m., the voices of a man and a woman came from outside the door. Ava really knew how to act spoiled. "Jaxon, when we get back, can you massage me? I've been wearing high heels all day and I'm exhausted." Jaxon's voice was low and gentle. "Sure, next time wear flat shoes. You're tired and I'll feel heartbroken." I bit my lip. "What about me, Jaxon?" My head split open. "Don't you feel heartbroken?" Their voices grew louder. Jaxon sounded hesitant. "Should we go to the hospital to check on Tessa? We haven't been in touch and I'm a bit worried." Hearing my name from his mouth made everything feel surreal. "Jaxon." Ava raised her voice. "I told you not to bring this up. Don't tell me you've been thinking about her all this time? She has amnesia, and if you keep hanging around her, what if she remembers?" Okay, Jaxon sighed helplessly. "I won't go to see her, alright? Don't be angry, little princess. You know you get ugly when you're mad." My heart ached, dull and painful. Jaxon had never been this indulgent with me. Click, the lights came on. I slowly raised my eyelashes. When Jaxon saw me, he immediately released the hand he had been holding Ava's finger with. His expression flashed with panic and surprise. Tessa, you. He started walking towards me but was stopped by Ava. Tessa, what are you doing in my house? Ava asked with a smile, but I could see a trace of guilt in her eyes. I stared blankly at Jaxon. I don't know, I have amnesia. It's like there's some kind of invisible force guiding me here and this place feels like my home. Jaxon's expression was hard to read, his eyes somewhat shattered. Ava forced a smile. You're my best friend, so of course my house is your house. I imitated her smile and nodded lightly. I'll take you back to the hospital first. Your head injury still isn't healed, Ava said impatiently, clearly wanting me to leave. I nodded obediently. Wait a minute. But Jaxon stopped her, slowly crouching down in front of me. Why aren't you wearing shoes? He asked, and as he looked up, the light shone directly into his eyes, like crushed stars. The hospital slippers don't fit and I lost one. He walked to the bathroom, filled a basin with warm water and brought it over to me. Jaxon's movements were natural after all, he used to help me with foot massages every month when I had cramps. Jaxon, Tessa. Just as Jaxon's hand was about to touch my ankle, Ava suddenly screamed. She rushed over and kicked the water basin over. Jaxon, what are you doing? Jaxon's expression was conflicted, his voice low and helpless. Ava, Tessa is a patient right now. You're my husband, do you think this is appropriate? Ava snapped at Jaxon, then pointed to the door and said to me, Tessa, it's already 9 p.m. It's not convenient for you to stay the night. Please leave. I pretended to be helpless and stood up. Sorry Ava, my memory's a mess. I only remember you're my only friend so I came here. But it seems like I've misunderstood something. I'll leave now. Barefoot, I slowly walked towards the door. But Jaxon grabbed my wrist. Tessa, you can stay, there's a guest room. Ava's eyes widened. Forget it, I smiled and declined. He quickly followed me. It's raining outside and you're in a state of amnesia. You have no friends or family in N City. Ava's your best friend and I'm also your friend. I looked at him confused. He forced a smile. Stay, I just can't let you leave like this, I'm worried. His words hit a nerve with Ava. She went wild, grabbing a cup from the table and throwing it at me. Tessa, can you just stop haunting us? Please stop bothering Jaxon. I stood calmly watching the glass cup fly toward me. But I knew it wouldn't hit me. Instead, it would hurt Ava and it would be her heart that was wounded. As expected, just half a meter from me, Jaxon stepped forward and shielded me in his arms. The cup hit his back, then fell to the floor, the glass shattering. Tessa, be careful. Jaxon carefully lifted me up, worried I would step on the glass. He frowned and looked at Ava. Ava, calm down. Ava looked at him in disbelief, but her attitude remained domineering. That was the arrogance and entitlement of someone who had been spoiled in love. She said, Jaxon, I command you, don't hug her. The arm wrapped around my waist loosened. Jaxon, helpless yet still gentle, replied, Ava, why argue with a patient? Ava grabbed her bag. Either she leaves or I do. You choose. I can leave, Jaxon, please let go of me. Jaxon's jaw tightened, a cold glint in his eyes. He was a proud man. In business, when betting with competitors, he was always the one to swallow his losses and never bow down. Ava had crossed his bottom line. Stepping over the broken glass, he walked slowly, taking me to the guest room. Rest easy, he said with a comforting smile. Then he left the room. I listened with satisfaction to the chaos in the living room. Amid the mess, Jaxon said one thing, clear and cutting to the heart. He had successfully driven Ava insane. Ava, if I'm not mistaken, we're neither married nor engaged. So what exactly is this home of yours? Jaxon said. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ava, angry, stormed off. The door slammed shut with a loud bang as I stepped out of the guest room. Jaxon was lying on the sofa, rubbing his temples, looking utterly exhausted. When he saw me, he immediately stood up. Sorry, I've made a fool of myself, Ava. I shook my head, cutting off his words. It's fine, I understand her. When a girl loves someone, her possessiveness tends to get overwhelming. Jaxon's face looked a little uncomfortable. Yeah. I looked around the room. Is this your and Ava's wedding home? I really like the decorating style. Jaxon just stared at me, silent. I continued walking around. This curtain, the color is so pretty. And this little bar area, I've always dreamed of having one. Imagine drinking a little wine with a lover and listening to some jazz, so lovely. Oh, and this vase, wow, this looks like a designer piece. It must be so hard to find. After all, this was the home I had personally decorated, from the bookshelf to the smallest spoon. Every piece was handpicked by me. How could I not love it? With an envious look, I shared my admiration for each piece of furniture, chatting non-stop. Ava really is my best friend, her taste is exactly like mine. I gazed at Jaxon softly, speaking each word clearly. This is my ideal home. His throat visibly tightened and he quickly looked away, avoiding my gaze. In the next second, he suddenly hugged me tightly, as if releasing some pent-up emotion. Tessa. His lips brushed against my cheek. Does it still hurt? His voice was soft and tender. I smiled. Was he asking about my head or my heart? It's been hurting for so long I've gotten used to it. His arms tightened around me. I didn't give him a chance to speak further. Instead I pushed him away. Jaxon, please have some self-respect. This will make Ava misunderstand. I have to leave. He chased after me. I'll take you home. No, it's fine. I smiled. Don't let this argument between me and Ava cause any more trouble. The best thing you can do now is go make up with her. He looked at me. I'll apologize to Ava for you. That's not necessary. I don't blame her at all. Jaxon didn't say anything else. By the time I reached the downstairs, I realized he had been following me the entire way. Go back, I said with a wave, smiling. Jaxon stubbornly stood his ground. At least let me see you get into the car safely. I sighed. All right. When I got into the car, he grabbed my arm again. If anything happens, call me immediately. I looked. Your number isn't saved in my phone. How is that possible? I casually handed him my phone, watching his expression grow more apologetic. After a few taps on the screen, he handed the phone back to me. Here it is, this is my number. I looked at the contact name on the screen. Jaxon, high school classmate. Before I had saved his name as the one I love the most. I really wanted to ask him, Jaxon, what does it feel like to kill a girl's most sincere love with your own hands? Since then, Jaxon started coming to the hospital to visit me regularly. The first time he came, he brought a pair of pink bunny slippers. The look in his eyes was a mix of guilt and heartache. Last time you said the hospital slippers didn't fit, so Ava bought you these. I smiled and thanked him. Why didn't Ava come herself? She's on a business trip right now. Jaxon was lying. Ava was surely still angry and Jaxon hadn't gone to comfort her. The second time he came, he brought a bag of clean clothes. I pretended to be surprised. Wow, Jaxon, how did you know exactly my size? We had slept in each other's arms before. While we weren't officially a couple, we were so familiar with each other. He rubbed his nose awkwardly and gave a clumsy excuse. Ava bought them, how would I know your size? You two are close and you're both similar in body shape. Right, how could I forget? I smiled naturally. I even helped her try on wedding dresses last time. Yeah. Jaxon's face darkened. That was exactly the reaction I wanted. Now I had learned how to subtly twist the knife without saying much. Ava, Jaxon, this is your doing. The third time Jaxon came, FeelGoodStories was doing his rounds. During my initial checkup, his somewhat clumsy actions had made me think he was just an intern, but later I found out he was a nationally renowned neurologist. Under 30, with numerous honors and publications, he was truly a young talent. The awkwardness during my first visit was just his compassion showing his care. He stood by my window, tall and elegant. Miss Tessa, everything looks normal. Why haven't you been discharged? I have amnesia, Dr. Fu. He looked at me, his eyes filled with playful amusement as though he were watching a mischievous child. How could I not know if you have amnesia or not? A true expert indeed. I was ruthlessly exposed, so I had no choice but to cover up the awkwardness with a joke. Well, the attending doctor is too handsome, so I pretended to be sick just to stay in the hospital. Is that not okay? FeelGoodStories lowered his head and a bright smile appeared in his long, deep eyes. If that's the reason, then I can accept it. He reached out and ruffled my hair. Still, it's better for you to discharge. I don't pursue my patients. Once you're discharged, then I'll have a chance. My heart skipped a beat and I turned to look out the window. A tree full of peach blossoms was in bloom. I felt flustered, unsure where to put my eyes, and I just happened to see Jaxon. He was standing in the doorway, his face ashen. He was holding my favorite sunshine rose, wearing a white shirt and dress pants. This had once been my favorite look. Now it only made me feel disgusted. Jaxon walked straight over to me, shoving past FeelGoodStories. Please move. FeelGoodStories raised his eyebrows and didn't respond, turning to the next room to continue his rounds. You're here, where's Ava? Jaxon didn't answer me. This attending doctor is a bit young. Do you think he's reliable? I smiled. He's a nationally recognized expert. Jaxon handed me some peeled fruit. I'm afraid he's just a name. Otherwise, why have you been hospitalized so long, and your memory hasn't recovered? I chewed the fruit. It wasn't sweet but quite sour. If I regained my memory, Jaxon, who would your fiancé be? How about we transfer you to another hospital? Jaxon, I called to him, my tone helpless. You care too much about me, this is a bit too much. Jaxon's face changed. No. It will make Ava misunderstand. I looked at him seriously. Love is probably the most precious thing for a girl. You can't let Ava down. Besides, from high school until now, you two have been together for nearly 10 years. Jaxon looked at me silent. Our eyes met. I really wanted to ask him, does what I said remind you of someone? After a long pause, he lowered his head, a bitter smile on his lips. I understand. Please don't meet with me alone anymore, Jaxon. He didn't say anything, slowly backing out of the room. By the way, I called out to him. He turned around, his eyes instantly lighting up, his joy evident. Wish you and Ava a happy wedding in advance. May your life be filled with love and happiness. He closed his eyes briefly and whispered, thank you. The next day, during his rounds, FeelGoodStories had a bandage on his forehead, and his glasses were changed. I laughed at him. Even a neurologist got hurt on the head? It was from being hit, he replied. I was shocked. It was that guy who came to see you yesterday. He's a real mystery. I was writing a case report when he suddenly barged into my office, told me to stay away from you, said you had a husband. I remembered what you told me, so I said, Tessa's husband isn't dead, the grass on his grave is taller than her. I don't see what was wrong with that. But that bastard must have taken something wrong and just swung his fist. I stood frozen in place. Jaxon, the one I knew, was always cool and composed, valuing intelligence and despising fights. How could he have lost control and hit someone? But no matter what, this had something to do with me. I apologized to Fu Yanji. Sorry I've caused you trouble. It's fine, Fu Yanji raised an eyebrow. That bastard is the one who's in trouble. He picked the wrong person to mess with. He smiled at me. I've been training in Sanzho for 10 years. Jaxon must have been badly hurt. Otherwise, Ava wouldn't have humbled herself and taken the initiative to meet with me. She had arranged to meet me in a cafe. She didn't ask for my preference and instead ordered a brown sugar macchiato for me. She always did this, self-centered and never considering other people's needs or feelings. But it was normal after all. She had been treated like a little princess her whole life. Good family background, good looks, endless suitors. Jaxon, even though he was a high-caliber man, was also fond of her. How enviable. She sat across from me, holding a pricey bag, her nails painted in a bold red, and her long curly hair shone with the luster of careful maintenance. And I, wearing a hospital gown under a coat, a bandage on my head. The contrast was stark, and it was clear she enjoyed the difference. She got straight to the point. You didn't lose your memory. I tapped the table. Not bad, you're not stupid. Playing weak to gain sympathy, I've seen that a lot. I didn't expect you, of all people, to learn to act like a green tea bitch. I shot back with a smile. Same to you. Lately, I had been wondering when Jaxon and Ava started their affair. After racking my brain, I finally realized it must have been during college. After I publicly confessed to Jaxon, he turned me down gently but didn't distance himself from me. By the time we were in college, we had developed a friends with more than friendship, but less than lovers kind of ambiguous relationship. Ava also went to university in N City. After I grew closer to Jaxon, the always high and mighty Ava surprisingly started to befriend me. From then on, the two of us became three, Jaxon, Ava, and me. And she, constantly sick, tripping, or injured from dancing, would rely on Jaxon as the only man to take care of her. Once, when she hurt her leg, Jaxon even stayed in the hospital for 2 whole months to take care of her. I had thought it was just out of gentlemanly behavior. But now, thinking about it, it was probably during all those moments of care that their feelings for each other grew. My hand holding the coffee cup involuntarily tightened. She glanced at it and smiled. Why aren't you drinking? Don't like it? The cappuccino's sweet. Honestly, Jaxon likes sweet girls. But you're not. You have sincerity and courage, but you don't know his taste. Really a pity. Her smile was so natural and unrestrained. She looked down on everything from her high position, pretending to be caring and understanding, but truly relishing her own victory. Just like that post on Facebook. It seemed like sincere gratitude, but in reality, it was a mockery from the winner to the loser. As if saying, look, the man you've been pursuing for 10 years, the man you loved with your whole youth, has always loved me instead. She sighed, pretending to be concerned for me. For the sake of our years of friendship, I'll be kind and give you a little advice. Next time you pursue a man, don't be so foolish. Ah. A sudden exclamation. Ava jumped up, her face pale. Tessa, you? I calmly looked at her, holding the empty coffee cup. Since Jaxon likes sweet things, why don't you make yourself sweet all over? You're crazy. Bang. I threw the coffee cup straight at her head. I got hurt on my head and you won't get away unscathed either. She held her head with a pitiful expression. Tessa, I know you're upset, but it's always been you chasing after Jaxon. He's always loved me. Is that so? I smiled calmly, looking at her. Perhaps my tone was too confident and Ava actually froze. Of course. Why are you so guilty? I smiled. It seemed like I had hit a nerve. She became frantic. I'm not guilty. Tessa, you're not playing the weak role now, you're just trying to stir things up, aren't you? I'm telling you, it's impossible. Jaxon's feelings for me, you don't even know. I couldn't be bothered to listen to her true love declarations. Then we'll see. She grabbed my arm. Aren't you ashamed? Are you planning to be a mistress? I slowly pried her hand off, smiling sincerely. Ava, why insult yourself? Jaxon appeared at the hospital again half a month later. His left cheek was a little swollen. Jaxon claimed it was from an infected wisdom tooth. But Fu Yanji had already told me that it was him who knocked out one of Jaxon's teeth. At the time, he had a cocky, smug smile on his face. So, does it feel a little more satisfying? I sincerely thanked him. Very satisfying. Fu Yanji lowered his eyes. After venting, will you forget about him? That day, Fu Yanji confessed his feelings to me. My heart was in turmoil, emotions colliding in my mind. There was hatred for Ava and Jaxon and an ambiguous fondness for Fu Yanji. But I hadn't resolved the previous relationship, and my sense of morality stopped me from starting a new one. So I apologized. Fu Yanji remained the gentleman, his voice warm. It's fine, I'll wait for you. His long hands waved in front of me. Tessa, what are you thinking about? Jaxon asked me. I shook my head and remained silent. Jaxon lowered his gaze and closed the distance between us. You used to tell me everything. Why are you distancing yourself from me now? Sorry, I don't remember. I looked out the window. I just feel like you're a stranger to me now. Jaxon let out a barely perceptible sigh. To ease the tension, I spoke up. I want to buy something. If it's not too much trouble, could you drive me? He smiled faintly. Of course. We went to a department store. I was carefully selecting items in the gift section while he pushed the shopping cart beside me. A saleswoman came over, promoting, "Sir, this is premium bird's nest. Why not buy a box for your wife?" Jaxon naturally took the bird's nest and gently handed it to me. Tessa, try it. I waved my hand. Sorry, he's not my husband. I emphasized, speaking clearly, we're high school classmates, that's all. His smile froze on his face. Seeing my confusion, he instinctively lowered his head to ease the awkwardness. What's wrong? I asked him. His voice was low. Nothing. I picked up a pair of couple mugs from the shelf, featuring cute cartoon images of a married couple. How about these mugs as a wedding gift for you and Ava? Mugs, they symbolize a lifetime. I smiled as I handed them to him. Wishing you both a lifetime of happiness and growing old together. I thought my blessing was perfectly fine, but Jackson's expression changed. Tessa, are you serious? I looked at him in confusion. How could blessings be fake? I pulled out some jewelry I had already prepared from my bag. Don't tell me you think I'm being cheap by just giving mugs? I actually bought Ava some jewelry, gold. She's a golden princess, you can't bully her. I also prepared a $10,001 gift for her, representing that Ava is 1 in a million. Jaxon closed his eyes, his temples subtly twitching. After a long pause, he quietly said, Tessa, your intentions are too heavy. What's the big deal? We're best friends. Giving a good wedding gift to my best friend is something I'm serious about. Actually, you and Ava's relationship isn't that close. My expression froze. Jaxon, I won't allow you to stir up trouble between me and Ava. If our relationship wasn't good, would she have asked me to try on wedding dresses for her? The air grew still. Our eyes locked. I could almost hear the sound of Jackson's conscience being torn apart. Eventually he backed down. He forced a smile. I was just joking. I smiled back and took out the most heart-piercing item. By the way, this is yours, right? It was a men's ring I had made by hand with Jackson's name engraved on the inside. From selecting the materials to designing and crafting it, I did it all myself. Countless times, my little hammer hit my fingers, and as I carved it, the carving knife left deep and shallow cuts on my hands. Seeing the effort I put into it, Jaxon tried to advise me. You could just buy a ring from a store, why go through the trouble? What do you know? I shot him a look. I wanted to give him the wedding ring I had personally made. His throat moved slightly. This is. I don't know why this ring ended up here. It must be that Ava left it with me. Jaxon stared at the ring but didn't take it. You don't want it? What would I want it for? Just take it, or people will think I'm secretly in love with you. I glanced at him. I have no interest in my best friend's lover, that's disgusting. He took the ring, his expression downcast. Jaxon stayed with me until evening. I was exhausted, but he didn't seem to want to leave. I curled up in the blanket. I want to sleep now, Jaxon. It was as if he didn't hear me dismiss him. I'll leave once you fall asleep. I was getting annoyed, and in my desperation I brought up Fu Yenji as a shield. You're actually a third wheel here. I pointed to the door. Dr. Fu is quite handsome and he'll be coming for rounds before he leaves. I'd like to spend some time with him alone. No. His response was sharp and firm. I secretly laughed. So, Jaxon, you can get jealous too? The girl who has always been full of you, you're in a panic, aren't you? I pretended to be confused and furrowed my brows. He forced himself to remain calm. I mean, this doctor doesn't look like a good person, those peach blossom eyes, very flirtatious. He wasn't one to gossip, and it was rare for him to come up with such a clumsy excuse. I don't think so. You've only ever liked one person, you don't have much experience with love. It's easy for men to deceive you. He rambled on. Who do I like? He seemed caught off guard by my question. He paused for a moment, then softly replied. A high school classmate. I smiled nonchalantly. You scared me. I thought I was in love with you. He fell silent. Not talking about the past, but this Dr. Fu, I actually think he's quite handsome. You like him? Jaxon instinctively asked. I glanced at him. He then realized his mistake. Sorry. I shook my head and changed the subject. Your phone has been ringing non-stop since earlier. It must be Ava. He put his phone on silent. That should stop it from ringing. I had nothing more to say and didn't feel like dealing with him. I pulled the blanket up and started to sleep. Ava was more impatient than I expected. The next day, she showed up at the hospital. At that time, Jaxon was helping me pack my things as I had requested to transfer hospitals. Besides wanting to avoid Dr. Fu, I had other plans. Jaxon helped me gather all the documents together. I leaned against the bed. I feel really bad for troubling you so much lately, but I honestly don't have many friends in N City. He paused for a moment. Tessa, you've never been this polite to me before. Really? I pointed to my head. I have amnesia, so I don't remember. Were we really that close before? He responded softly. Very close. His voice carried a hint of sadness. What a pity, I sighed softly. I don't remember. He put down the things he was holding and sat down in front of me. His gaze fell on my face and his expression was filled with an unspeakable sorrow. Tessa, I've been asking myself if I really want you to regain your memory. He had never looked at me like that before. As if he loved me. I asked him seriously, what do you mean? Nothing. He lowered his gaze, seemingly avoiding the question and changing the subject. Why the sudden transfer? Didn't you say the attending doctor was a nationally renowned expert? I tugged the bedsheet slightly, forcing a natural smile. If I want to transfer, then I'll transfer. Jaxon noticed my movement and gently placed his hand on the back of mine, slowly releasing my clenched fingers. What happened? Don't be nervous, Before he could finish, the door to the room opened. Ava stood there, her gaze falling on our hands. Like they were burned, Jaxon immediately let go of my hand. Ava, what are you doing here? Ava sneered. You've been ignoring my calls since yesterday. If I didn't come, were you planning to hide your little rendezvous in bed? Jaxon gently explained. It's not what you think. Tessa wants to transfer hospitals and I'm just helping her pack her things. Transfer hospitals? Ava glared at him. Jaxon, are you stupid? Tessa is a manipulative bitch. She's never had amnesia. She's been playing you for a fool. I remained silent, sitting quietly on the bed. Ava, in a fit of rage, snapped. Tessa, why aren't you saying anything? Playing the innocent act? Who are you pretending to be weak for? Why won't you admit it? You never had amnesia. Just admit it to Jaxon. Jaxon wrapped his arms around Ava's waist, trying to calm her down. Ava, stop. Tessa really has amnesia. If I don't take care of her, who else will? She's pretending. That manipulative bitch is just pretending. Ava broke free from Jaxon's hold, stormed up to me and got closer with each step. Are you going to speak up? Are you going to admit it? I silently stared at her. She was completely enraged, grabbed something from the bedside table and threw it violently at my head. Tessa, why pretend so well? Why fake amnesia? Why not fake a terminal illness instead? As she moved, hospital bills, admission forms and checkup papers scattered like confetti. A diagnosis report landed perfectly in front of Jaxon. He picked it up, looked at the words and his face immediately turned pale, very pale. His voice cracked and he stumbled to kneel in front of me. I had never seen Jaxon act so out of control. Tessa, you didn't lose your memory? Why did you lie to me? You clearly... His lips trembled and several times he opened his mouth to speak, only to fall silent again. It was as if the words he wanted to say would burn him if they came out. I sighed. Jaxon, don't get worked up. Suddenly, he hugged me, his arms tightening around me, pulling me closer as if I might disappear if he didn't hold me tight enough. It's just brain cancer, I won't die right away. Tears fell in large drops onto my shoulder. Tessa, does it hurt? Jaxon's voice sounded muffled. It doesn't hurt. You're lying. He choked. You're not even telling me if it hurts? Tessa, I was wrong. His shoulders heaved as he tried to hold back his sobs. I gently patted his back. You can lie to me, but I can't lie to you? I was wrong, I really was wrong. That day at the bridal shop, I don't even know what happened. You can just say I was out of my mind, but please forgive me. It's fine. I pulled away from his embrace, looking into his eyes with a gentle smile. I really hope you end up with Ava. If I have to give you to another girl, I'd only choose Ava. After I'm gone, you can be sad, but I only allow you to be sad for a little while. If you're sad for too long, I'll feel bad for you. I'm generous, you and Ava should be happy together, fulfill my wish, okay? Have 2 kids, 1 boy, 1 girl. Even though I want you and Ava to get married, I don't want you to bring her to visit me at my grave, because deep down I'm still a little petty. I'll be jealous. I said this slowly, always calm and gentle. Jaxon, however, was already crying uncontrollably. How long has it been? When did you find out? More than a year. It was the day after my birthday last year when they found it. Jaxon froze for a moment, then slammed his fist against the bed frame. What have I been doing? How could I not have noticed? Tessa, what have I been doing? How could I not have noticed? I smiled softly at him, my gaze still gentle. Jaxon, what have you been doing? Don't you know? Last year on my birthday, Jaxon had promised me that he would spend it with me. He said he had a surprise prepared for me. Because of those words, I happily made a whole table of dishes. When I finished cooking, I realized not a single dish was one I liked. My birthday and the food was all what Jaxon liked. At that time, I truly had him in my heart. That day, I was especially excited, constantly texting him to ask about the gift. Is it a doll? Did I see it when we were shopping? Is it roses? Jaxon, don't be so cliché. Red roses are kind of ugly. Could it be jewelry? But don't make it too expensive. Clothes? Bag? Cosmetics? Skincare? I sent messages all day long. But unfortunately, I didn't receive a single reply. I slouched at the dining table, watching the food that had been reheated 4 or 5 times get cold again, watching the clock tick towards midnight, watching as my birthday slowly passed. My birthday had no Jaxon, no surprise. At midnight, the world and my heart both fell into loneliness. I whispered, "Happy birthday" to me, then threw the cake away. Jaxon didn't come home until around 3 a.m. looking exhausted. I pushed aside the disappointment in my heart and forced a smile. "Where's my birthday gift?" He froze, tapped his forehead. "Sorry, Tessa, I forgot. Today was just too much." "It's okay, it's my fault for having my birthday fall on a Monday. Mondays are always busy at work with all the meetings, investment discussions and everything." I kept talking because it was the only way to stay calm. If I stopped, I was afraid I would cry. "No," he slowly said, "it's Ava. She was sick and I had to take her to the hospital." At the time, I didn't hear anything unusual, and even felt a little embarrassed about my small tantrum. My friend had been hospitalized and I was still throwing a fit. "But we still have to celebrate your birthday even though it's late." Perhaps feeling guilty, Jaxon took the initiative to heat the food. He lit a lighter as a makeshift birthday candle, looking at me with eyes full of tenderness. "Tessa, make a wish." I folded my hands together, more devout than a young girl. "I wish that I and Jaxon can." The phone rang, cutting the warm moment short. "Ava's calling." Jaxon immediately stood up and walked to the balcony to answer the call. "Jaxon." The words, "Can you wait for me to make a wish?" got stuck in my throat. Jaxon quickly changed his clothes and put on his shoes. "Ava's fever spiked again. High fever, I need to go right away." He rushed out the door in a flurry. Not even a happy birthday was said. I slowly lowered my hands from my prayer. What was I going to wish for again? Seemed like I wanted to wish that Jaxon and I would be together forever. He must have remembered what happened on my birthday last year, because his expression suddenly became filled with pain. I could almost hear his conscience whipping him, and I still gently looked at him. No tears, no laughter, neither sorrow nor joy. He suddenly raised his hand and slapped himself again. "I deserve to die, Tessa, I really deserve to die." I shook my head. "It's okay." I looked up and smiled at him. "Anyway, I'm willing to be wasted by you." He opened his mouth to speak but couldn't get a word out. He just stared at me, holding my hand tighter and tighter. He didn't even notice Ava standing beside us, like a volcano ready to erupt. "Tessa, your acting is really good." Ava's lips curled with bitterness. "When will you die? I'll come and see you off." "Ava." Before I could say anything, Jaxon sharply interrupted her. "You can't talk to Tessa like that." "Like that? Like what?" This was probably the first time Jaxon had spoken so harshly to Ava. She clearly couldn't accept his attitude and immediately switched to defense mode. "Jaxon, where's your brain? She can pretend to have amnesia, so why can't she pretend to have a terminal illness? I'm telling you, this is all her act. It's all about making you feel guilty, making you break up with me, all to break us up." Jaxon's face turned red with anger. "Ava, get out." Seeing that she couldn't convince Jaxon, Ava turned her attention to me. "Tessa, you tell me, are you pretending?" I honestly admired her. In such a passive situation, she could still act so domineering. Being the favored one truly gives one confidence. Unfortunately, she was no longer the favored one now. I nodded. "Yes, I'm pretending." Ava sighed in relief. "At least you still have a bit of conscience, admitting it on your own." She looked at Jaxon smugly. "Did you hear that? This little green tea actually admitted she's pretending." I saw Jaxon's fist clench, the veins on the back of his hand standing out. "Ava, get out now, immediately." She paused, stunned. "Jaxon, you're yelling at me? For a scheming bitch, you actually..." A crisp slap sounded. Ava stood frozen in place. Jaxon withdrew his hand, the clear print of his slap on her face. "Get out," he said coldly. "I don't want to say it again." Tears immediately filled Ava's eyes and she ran out crying. I lowered my eyes and secretly smiled in my heart. Winning was so easy. What was that saying again? The most damaging thing is not the lost white moonlight, but the dead white moonlight. And even more damaging than the dead white moonlight is the white moonlight on the verge of dying. You know she's leaving and no matter what you do, you can't keep her. That helplessness and regret of losing your love, helplessly watching her go, will torment him every sleepless night. Besides, my tragedy was caused entirely by him. Jaxon, I will make sure you never find peace for the rest of your life. I will make you wish you never heard my name again. After that day, Jaxon became like a dog I had raised, unwilling to leave my side for even a moment. He bought me gifts. I smiled and pushed them away. These are just material things. I don't need them right now. You can't take them with you when you die. He bought me food. I shook my head. I don't have an appetite. My body is too weak and I can't digest it. He even tried to hold me as I fell asleep, the faint scent of cedar wrapping around me. I used to be addicted to that scent, but now it just made me feel nauseous. Jaxon, can you let go of me? Does it make you uncomfortable? No, I'm just not used to it. His expression froze for a moment and he forced a smile. We've been together for so many years and you're still not used to it? I'm not used to it. As for the reason, Jaxon knew better than I did. He was silent for a while, then whispered, Tessa, I'm sorry. I shook my head. He held my hand. Then let me sit by your bed and sleep, at least let me hold your hand, okay? His voice carried a sense of grievance and pleading. He searched the world for experts to treat me. I looked at him. Jaxon, I don't want to be treated anymore. Every chemotherapy hurts so much. I don't want to have my head drilled open. I want to leave this world with dignity. When he heard this, he buried his head in his arms. His slender shoulder blades arched and he sobbed, like a crane that had lost its partner. After crying, he tried to console me, pretending to be strong. If Tessa doesn't want treatment, then we won't treat it. Tessa, what do you want to do? Whatever it is, I'll go with you. I don't have any wishes. I turned my head to look out the window. The clouds gathered and scattered, leaving only the blue sky. Jaxon suddenly spoke. But I have one. Jaxon proposed to me. The ring I had never seen before, and it was poorly made. He choked up. Tessa, this is the ring I made by hand. It's a perfect match with the one you made for me. If this were before, I would have been moved to tears. But now I just found it laughable. Tessa, forgive me for being late for so many years. Please marry me. Out of nowhere, a crowd of people appeared, holding ribbons and roses, surrounding Jaxon and me. Marry him, marry him, marry him. The atmosphere was lively, but I just found it noisy. Jackson's face grew more anxious in my silence. What's wrong, Tessa? You don't want to. I smiled, about to speak, when Ava barged into the room with her group. Jaxon, I found the flaw. Tessa doesn't have brain cancer. That diagnosis was forged by her. Don't be fooled by her. Ava urgently shoved the diagnosis report in front of Jaxon. Look at this, the print looks unnatural, doesn't it? It doesn't look like a legitimate hospital report. If you don't believe me, we can consult a forensic expert. Jaxon looked at me. Tessa. His voice wavered. Just that one sentence and I understood. Sorry, Tessa. I pressed my lips together, forcing a smile. Can we not have it authenticated? Jaxon looked at me, silent. The atmosphere dropped to freezing point. He put away the ring box and returned to our original state. The state where he could abandon me for Ava at any moment. The state of the Jaxon who was indifferent to me. The Jaxon who didn't love me. He gave me a comforting smile. It's just to have an expert verify it, no need to be nervous. I asked him, you still don't believe me? He didn't answer directly. It'll be quick. You don't have to go, you can stay here and wait for me. Finally, I let go first. All right. He walked out and Ava looked at me triumphantly. But I already had no strength to fight back. Whether the diagnosis was true or not, at this point I had already lost. But then Fu Yenji pushed open the door. He was wearing a white coat, standing tall in the doorway, not giving Jaxon any space. The diagnosis was made by me, the seal is mine. My diagnosis cannot be wrong. Mr. Zhao's doubt about Miss Tessa means doubting me. He adjusted his glasses. Unless Mr. Zhao plans to sue me in court for medical fraud, I will not allow you to take the diagnosis out of the hospital. Jaxon stood facing Fu Yenji. Fu Yenji's status as a globally renowned neurologist seemed to make Jaxon hesitate. Suddenly, Fu Yenji chuckled and stepped aside to open the door. Of course, you're welcome to go ahead. I don't care if my career is ruined. If I can't be a doctor, I'll go home and inherit the family business, but... He raised an eyebrow. But have you considered that once trust between lovers is destroyed, it can never be rebuilt? It was like a cautionary proverb, and Jaxon immediately realized it. He looked at me with hesitation and nervously spoke. Tessa. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking clearly earlier. I'm sorry. I shook my head. It's fine. You can go now, take them with you. I'm so tired, I just want to rest. Jaxon sent everyone away, and as Ava left, she hurled unspeakable insults at me. Words like mistress, scheming bitch, and more without end. I thought she was so foolish. At a time like this, all she could do was vent her emotions. But Jaxon didn't leave. He stubbornly knelt beside my bed, holding the ring. I turned my head, refusing to look at him. He gently touched my hair. I know Tessa is angry with me. It's okay, I'll wait for you to forgive me. The night stretched on. The moonlight was chilling to the bone. I really didn't want to stay in a standoff with Jaxon any longer. Just put the ring on the table. Jaxon flinched, seemingly not expecting me to agree, and he was so surprised he couldn't speak clearly. Tessa, you're accepting my proposal? I repeated, just put the ring on the table. He staggered to his feet and shakily put the ring on my finger. Thank you, Tessa, thank you. I forced a smile, avoiding his kiss. Now can you get up? He nodded. I'm going to tell my friends right now, I'm marrying you. He rushed out the door. I'll find the wedding planner right away. I wonder if there are any wedding planners open at this hour? No matter, I'll find one. Tomorrow, Tessa, tomorrow we're getting married. I watched his frantic excitement disappear through the door, feeling no emotion in my heart. Tomorrow? Jaxon, there's no tomorrow for us. I ran away. While Jaxon was informing friends and family about our wedding, I had already boarded a plane to the Maldives. By the time he had set up the wedding venue and drove the wedding car to pick me up, he would find an empty hospital room. On the bed, there would be a notice of my death. I wanted those who never loved me in this life to remember the warmth of my presence in every lifetime to come. And of course, Ava would share in this bitter fruit. On the way to the hospital in the wedding car, Jaxon suddenly felt an unexplained panic. It was the same feeling he had when Tessa took a taxi alone that day at the bridal shop. At that time, an impulse surged in his heart. Catch up, Jaxon, catch up, tell Tessa you were just joking. But in the end he did nothing. He kept telling himself, this is fine, this is the right way to handle it, you don't love Tessa, you love Ava. Tessa's amnesia was the perfect ending. No need to hurt her and he could be with Ava without complications. But he didn't expect that Tessa was faking it. And he never thought that Tessa had brain cancer late stage. She was dying. It wasn't until he was about to lose her that he realized how much he loved Tessa. After all, 10 years like spring rain, silently nourishing, yet deeply intertwined. He finally realized he could never live without Tessa. But in the midst of misfortune, the only good luck was that he had finally seen his true feelings. To be with Tessa before she passed away, at least that was something he wouldn't regret. He also felt lucky that Tessa loved him so much, and after everything he had done wrong, she was still willing to forgive him. Jaxon took a deep breath and forced a big smile. Tessa, my bride, I'm here to take you home. But in the hospital room there was no sign of Tessa. Panic gripped him for a moment, but he didn't dare think too much about it. He wasn't in the bathroom, not in the hallway, not in the garden, nowhere. Nowhere at all. He braced his shaky body wanting to ask the nurse. But then he saw a letter on the white bedsheet. It was short. Jaxon, I want to die in a place full of sunshine. In the next life, don't come looking for me. I never want to see you again, not even in the next life. Despair washed over him like a tidal wave as he held the letter, sobbing uncontrollably. He went mad looking for Tessa, but found nothing. He lay on the bed where he once held Tessa, closing his eyes, imagining her still being there. The deeper the night became, the clearer the memories in his mind were. He slapped himself over and over. He stayed locked up, sorting through Tessa's things. It was a pity, there was so little left, not a single item to remember her by. He suddenly remembered how Tessa had repeatedly wanted to exchange gifts with him, but he had refused every time. Only young couples exchange gifts. Our relationship doesn't need that kind of ambiguity. Regret surged in waves within him. What the hell had he done? How could he be such an asshole? Jaxon pried open Tessa's apartment door. He had only realized when he was going through Tessa's belongings that he didn't even have a key to her place. Entering the small apartment, it felt like his throat was stuffed with cotton. He wanted to cry but couldn't. Everything he saw in Tessa's home was filled with traces of him. There was the high school uniform on which he had simply signed his name, yet Tessa had kept it for a full 10 years. She had even sealed it in plastic, the other's signatures faded, but his was as pristine as the day it was written, as if it were from yesterday. Just like Tessa's feelings for him, 10 years of silence, yet unwavering. On the table there was a photo of him and Tessa together. Technically it was a photo of 3 people. When they encountered a photo booth, Tessa excitedly suggested taking a picture, but he had refused. It wasn't until Ava wanted to take one that he reluctantly agreed. To his surprise, Tessa folded Ava out of the photo and turned it into a picture of just the 2 of them. She had loved him so carefully, so humbly. In the kitchen there was an entire cookbook. Opening it, he saw it was filled with all the things he liked to eat. Jaxon likes sugar, but his stomach isn't great, so remember to use xylitol. Jaxon likes stewed pork ribs, don't put in spring onions. At night, prepare a late-night snack for Jaxon, try seafood porridge. He seemed to like it the last time he had 2 small bowls. When he got to the last page, he suddenly remembered that Tessa liked spicy food, and over the years she had even changed her taste to match his. She loved him more than she loved herself. So, what was he doing while Tessa was doing all this? Rejecting her, pushing her away, hurting her again and again, constantly leaving her to be with Ava. Regret, pain, and despair wrapped around him like a cocoon, suffocating him, draining all the air and all his emotions. He lay on the floor, tears falling one by one. Ava thought Jaxon was probably going mad. He locked himself in Tessa's small apartment, not leaving a step, not even going to work for an entire week. On the 8th day, she could no longer bear it and stormed into the apartment. The stench of alcohol hit her face, almost choking her. The curtains were drawn, the room was dark as if it were an abyss. She fumbled to turn on the light, and the floor was covered with empty bottles and cigarette butts. Jaxon was lying on the floor, his stubble rough, his hair unkempt, clutching one of Tessa's clothes. Are you trying to kill yourself? She couldn't help but curse. Jackson's gaze was unfocused. I do want to die. Tessa's gone, I don't want to live either, but I don't have the courage. Jaxon chuckled bitterly. I'm such a coward. Ava didn't want to believe it. She put aside her past grievances and sat down beside him. Jaxon, you're drunk, you know you love me. Jaxon stared at her for a moment, then shook his head firmly. No, I love Tessa. Ava felt despair. She had confronted Jaxon, pouted and thrown tantrums, but Jaxon no longer coaxed her as he had before. He lay there, indifferent, making her feel like a madwoman. In a fit of desperation, she pressed the blade to her wrist. Jaxon, if I die, will you finally start missing me? Jaxon looked at her. Ava, you can call me dark. But I really think after everything we did to Tessa, we both deserve to die. Ava could no longer hold herself up. She threw the blade away and ran out, crying. For the first time, she clearly realized that the living could never compete with the dead. But she still felt like Tessa hadn't died. And her proof came when she found it. She had the diagnosis report sent for forensic verification and found it was fake. When she learned the truth, she was ecstatic. She called Tessa provocatively, not expecting her to answer. But the phone call did connect. "Tessa, I've got you. You lied to Jaxon twice, you scheming bitch, just wait." "What are you waiting for?" Tessa's voice sounded calm. Ava smiled triumphantly. She believed that as long as Tessa wasn't dead, she could easily win. "Wait for Jaxon to despise you, to be disgusted by you. Are you so sure?" "Of course." "Then I wish you success." Tessa's voice carried a hint of contempt. "But I really don't care." Those words made Ava uneasy. She held the verification report and found Jaxon. "Jaxon, I'm sure this time Tessa has been playing us all." Jaxon sat up with a sudden jerk. The surprise and expectation on his face scared her. "Tessa's okay?" Jaxon grabbed her shoulders. "Tell me." Ava's tears flowed. "Tessa, she didn't have amnesia and she didn't die. She and that Dr. Fu set this whole thing up." "Tessa didn't die?" Jaxon stared at her in disbelief. "So she was just hiding? She's really not dead." In that moment, Ava suddenly wished Tessa were dead. "Say something." Ava was terrified by Jackson's reaction. "She's not dead, I'm sure. She even answered my call." Jaxon frantically searched for his phone. "Then why hasn't she answered mine? She's still angry with me." "It's fine, she can hate me as long as she still thinks of me." Ava watched him lose control, her heart suddenly filled with sadness. She cautiously reached out and touched Jaxon. "Do the things you said to me still count?" "What did you say?" Jaxon was busy dialing the number he had memorized by heart, not even lifting his head. "It was the words you said, that you loved me, wanted to marry me and would treat me well for a lifetime." Ava wanted to say it, but the words wouldn't come out. Finally, Jaxon connected the call. "Hello, is this Tessa?" "Tessa, can you hear me?" When Jaxon called, I was sunbathing on the island. It somewhat ruined my mood. I didn't want to answer, but Fu Yenji insisted that I take the call. He said, "Tessa, deal with your troublesome ex. I don't want to keep waiting here, holding up the love sign." I instinctively tried to avoid it. "I'm not ready for a relationship yet." Fu Yenji leisurely picked up his glass. "I can wait, but do you have the conscience to let me wait? I've staked my career to help you lie." I was caught off guard by his words. What kind of man was this, using the same tricks I used on Jaxon against me? He saw through my thoughts, smiling lightly. "You've fallen into my hands now." Under Fu Yenji's persuasion, I pressed the answer button. Jackson's voice sounded like it had aged years. It felt like it was from another lifetime. "Tessa, why aren't you speaking?" "Tessa, can you hear me?" "Tessa." "I can hear you, Jaxon." The other side fell silent. After a long pause, Jackson's trembling voice came through. "Thank God, Tessa, you're not dead, thank God. Do you need something? If not, I'm hanging up." "I do." Jackson's voice was urgent, as if he wanted to reach through the phone and grab me. "You still count my proposal, right? If you come back, we can immediately get our marriage license, find a custom wedding dress." "Jaxon," I interrupted him, "if I remember correctly, I never accepted your proposal. I only told you to put the ring on the table." Another long silence. "Yes. You never accepted my proposal. Then Tessa, are you blaming me?" It was a silly question. But I answered seriously. "No, I'm not blaming you and I don't hate you. I no longer have any expectations of you." I heard a sob on the other side and I guess Jaxon must have been crying. I wanted to hang up. But then I heard Jaxon say, "Can I see you again?" "There's no need. Please, just let me see you, I just want to make sure you're healthy and safe." "Forget it." Ava watched Jaxon begging her and suddenly anger flared inside her. She snatched the phone from Jaxon. "Tessa, are you crazy? Jaxon is begging you like this and you're still not agreeing? Enjoying watching someone else's humiliation gives you pleasure, doesn't it? Are you some kind of psychopath?" My calm was suddenly disturbed by Ava. "Isn't it you, Ava, who loves to watch others in such a state?" "Ava, what right do you have to criticize me? You owe me an apology too." She was stunned, then after a long pause she awkwardly retorted, "Loving someone isn't wrong. So this is the mindset of a mistress." I suddenly felt that my punishment for her hadn't been enough. "Jaxon, can you hear me?" "Jaxon, I hear you, Tessa, I hear you, go ahead. I can't think of a reason to meet you, but if I had to find one, I think it should be..." "What?" Jaxon asked urgently. "As long as you're willing to meet me, I'll agree to anything. Unless you're marrying Ava, I will attend your wedding." I hung up right after saying that. "Ava, I want you to know you can't compete with me whether I'm dead or alive. The only reason you have had the upper hand in the past is because I've never fought you for it." Ava couldn't believe it. Tessa, who is always harmless, would suggest something so cruel, so malicious. "Jaxon, unless you love me, I won't marry you." She wanted to say it, but the words wouldn't come out. Deep down, she still hoped that Jaxon would love her. "Ava, marry me." Her heart ached, but she kept up her pride as a princess. "Is this how you propose?" Jaxon suddenly became very impatient. "I don't have the time or mood for this. While I'm still willing to marry you, you'd better get with the program and agree quickly. He shattered her pride so cruelly. You at least have to say that you love me, she cried, tears streaming down. Jaxon kept his mouth tightly shut. After a long silence, he said, in this life, I have loved only one person, and that person is Tessa. Love and indifference, it turned out to be so clear. The electronic wedding invitation arrived sooner than expected. In the wedding photo, Ava's smile looked more like a cry. Jaxon carefully sent me a message. Tessa, you kept your word, right? You'll come to my wedding. I married Ava, but I don't love her. I'm just following your advice. Ava saw the message. She was so angry she nearly ground her teeth. He wanted to scream, to shout, to question Jaxon. But she didn't dare. Because in Jackson's eyes, there was no trace of love left. He had even clearly said, though it's cruel, I married you only to see Tessa once. I think you should cooperate because compared to what we did to her, this little thing is nothing. Just consider it a punishment we both deserve. She really wanted to run away, but she couldn't bring herself to. Because she loved Jaxon even though he didn't love her. I looked at the message, my emotions mixed. I didn't expect Jaxon would go this far. Fu walked over slowly. Don't lock yourself into a moral cage and don't think you've done too much. Compared to the 10 years Jaxon wasted with you and the harm Ava caused, this is nothing. He could now naturally hold me in his arms. And I surprisingly liked his closeness. Besides, a scumbag and a bitch should be tied together. Let them harm each other. I ultimately didn't attend Jaxon and Ava's wedding. Because Fu had proposed to me. He consulted a master for an auspicious date, and it turned out that the perfect date was the same day as Jackson's wedding. I'm not someone who dwells on the past. I'm accustomed to looking forward. Nothing is more important than the happiness I have in front of me, so I decided to focus on preparing for my wedding with Fu. I walked into the bridal shop again. When I changed into the mermaid wedding gown, I tripped and fell. Perhaps it left a psychological scar. When I stood up, an overwhelming sense of insecurity flooded me, and almost instinctively I blurted out, "Who are you? Who is getting married?" My heart was racing, almost about to jump out of my chest. I feared once again hearing the words, "Miss Tessa, I'm just your ordinary friend." But Fu walked firmly toward me. He first carefully checked every part of me, ensuring I wasn't injured, then took out a ring from his pocket. Then he earnestly explained to me, "Although you might be joking, because I love you, even if it's just a joke, I will explain it properly. I am Fu. You are Tessa. We are engaged and we plan to marry next Wednesday. This is the ring I made for you. If you forget any details, feel free to ask me and I will spend my whole life tirelessly answering." Tears fell uncontrollably from my eyes. There are some things I'm unsure about, like... I choked up. "I know I can answer you right now." Fu interrupted me, giving me a response that made me feel completely at ease. "I love you. No matter how many times you forget, I will answer as many times as you need, and this answer will never change."